Okay, so now we're going to hear an overview of the Canadian Centre for Climate Services from Dr. Heather Morrison, who spent her career at the interface between science and decision-making. She's worked as a research scientist in the field of exotoxicology, a senior science advisor and research manager in the field of air quality, and as a director of the Climate Research Division. These positions have provided Heather with the opportunity to work closely with decision makers to deliver relevant and credible science to support policy and regulatory development. Heather is on our ClimateWest Board of Directors, and we're pleased to have her share an overview of the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. Heather.
Hello, everyone. So nice to meet you all. I'm very happy to be here. I'm especially happy to be here because I have done many things in my career related to environmental issues, but this is my first foray into adaptation. So for me, I'm sticking to my comfort zone, which is the science underpinning of adaptation. But it has been a welcome change for me to work in an area that's more applied, where we can work to bring the tremendous evolution in our scientific knowledge and capacity and make that wealth of innovation accessible to those that can use it to improve the lives of Canadians, to improve the resilience of Canada. So I am here to represent the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. We can go to the next slide. Oh, I have a remote. Oh, that's right. Yes, sorry about that. A monitor as well. Oh, that's so convenient. I don't have to turn my head. Okay, excellent. So the Canadian Centre for Climate Services is here to provide Canadians with information and support to consider climate change in their decisions. So I have this slide, which looks very bureaucratic. I will not deny that. But I wanted to situate the Canadian Centre for Climate Services in the Department of the Environment and Climate, well, in the context of Environment and Climate Change Canada. So the service is part of Environment and Climate Change Canada. And what I wanted to illustrate here is our relationship with my colleague, who is will also be attending the conference, Laniel Bateman, who is the lead for the National Adaptation Strategy. So the National Adaptation Strategy is being led by the Climate Change Adaptation Policy Group. And that is the sister group in our directorate to the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. And why I want to highlight this affiliation is because it makes a lot of sense to pair an organization that is trying to advance adaptation across Canada with an organization that is here to really provide information on the first thing you need to understand before you go down that path. And that is, how is the environment changing? And thus, how do we need to change to respond to that change in the environment? So why do we need to adapt? We need to adapt and to aggressively mitigate because the climate will continue to warm until global greenhouse gas emissions, anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, reach net zero. As long as we are not at global net zero, the planet will continue to warm. Once we hit global net zero greenhouse gas emissions, the climate will stabilize at wherever we are at when we hit net zero. Once we stabilize, we are never going back to the climate that we have now or that we had in any kind of time frame that we can relate to as humans in our lifetime. So that stark news is the reason why net zero is such a big deal. So we go on and on about net zero because the warming does not stop until we hit net zero. So that is a very good reason to want to adapt. That is a very rational reason for considering adaptation. It is also a very good reason to really try to aggressively mitigate. And the graph I have on the right-hand side of this slide was just to illustrate this point. This is an idealized experiment that was done by Environment Canada with our global climate model, where we ran the model with emissions, greenhouse gas emissions that essentially represented business as usual. And then they went beyond net zero. They just turned off the part of the model that injects anthropogenic greenhouse gases into the model to see what the model did. And as you can see, it just stabilizes at wherever we're at. And this experiment's been repeated many times, but it is just for those who want to see what it looks like. That's what it looks like. So why do we have climate services? Well, we have climate services to render accessible to Canadian society our scientific understanding of how the climate will change going forward, so that we can all start to take this into consideration in our decisions and our actions as they relate to timescales that are impacted by climate change. So climate services aims to equip decision makers in climate sensitive sectors with better information to help society adapt to climate change. And it is a service that recognizes that the needs of those in this space are often very bespoke and local. So the kinds of information that comes out of a climate model is rarely interfaces very well with the kind of decision-making frameworks or risk management frameworks that are used in various aspects of society for various things. So our goal is to bridge that gap so that the climate information, you can relate that to whatever endpoint you are concerned about in the business that you are doing. So in the context of the adaptation cycle, the CCCS aims to fill a very specific place in that cycle. So we are not an adaptation service. We are a Western climate data service. So in that regard, we really target step 2 in this particular adaptation cycle, which is to help understand how the climate will change. So in that regard, towards that ends, we provide historical climate data, access to future climate projections, resources and information to help you use that data, and training and support, again, to help you understand and use the data that the scientific community is producing for us, bringing to bear. So the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, executes its role by taking a user-centric approach to developing and delivering climate services. So what do we mean by this? We engage with users to understand needs, develop new products by collaborating with experts. We increase awareness of the products and services that are out there, and we provide training and guidance. One of our marquee portals for disseminating our data and information is a collaborative portal that we have produced with a number of our collaborators that include Oranos, and Alain is here from Oranos, the Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium in British Columbia, the Prairie Climate Center, ClimateAtlantique, and Sabine is here, the Centre de Recherche Informatique de Montréal in Montreal, and Habitat 7. ClimateData.ca has analyses pages where you can download data in different formats in different ways, but it also has sector modules to provide guidance about what variables information might be relative to decisions in that sector. It has a learning zone to support understanding and using the data. And we have a newsletter and blog because the products and services we offer are ever evolving on our site. So there's always something new coming up. We also have a service desk that is staffed by 2 real live human beings who you can call. Unfortunately, they got a lot of calls last 2 weeks because they were the only number that was still being manned during the strike. We do not answer questions for the CRA. I'm just telling you, we got flooded with those. But we do answer questions related to climate. And so they will help you if you're really not sure what to do or what data to use or whatever. Not only can we help you, but we work with a network of experts. And so if we can answer your question, we can certainly direct you to someone who can. So we also have the map of adaptation actions, which is a portal that offers case studies of adaptation actions that have taken place across Canada. It too is always being updated, and it's a good resource for getting ideas for what others have done in Canada. And last but not least, we nurture and support and foster the development of regional climate services organizations to provide regional services. And this is in recognition of two things. One is that we are too small to provide the hands-on service that many people need in order to advance through the adaptation cycle. So we need to work with other organizations who are on the ground, who have the local expertise and have the local networks to support people moving through this cycle. And it's also in recognition of the fact that we need people on the ground who can bring everyone back to climatedata.ca, where we really are focused on providing state of the science information on climate change to Canadians. And so it's a two-way street. We basically acknowledge and want to foster that regional work. And then we also want to have a network that can bring people back to the data and services that we are offering. And so I want to acknowledge that most, but not all of the executive directors from the regional hubs are here today. And I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the important role they play in the delivery of climate services in Canada. It's a pleasure working with all of the organizations. So with respect to the future of the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, we are always really got a wonderful opportunity to grow and expand, because the Climate Change Research Division and us got a nice infusion of resources in the fall, which will really mean a step level increase in the quality and the amount of science that we can produce in Canada for climate. And in addition to that, that will all start to feed in to the production of the next Canada's Changing Climate Report, which is to be delivered in 2025. Environment Canada just launched the start of that process. And for the first time, we are going to start to really tightly integrate the science to assessment to services continuum in Canada. And what this will look like is that we will aim to have many of the data sets that underpin the analyses in the assessment available through climatedata.ca. So I'm almost done, Kara, because I know we're getting tight for time. So we have some new products and services that are coming online in the next weeks to months to years. So these include future projections of humidex, fire weather index, snowfall projections, permafrost proxy indices, and others. We have new services. We're developing a marine and finance sector module. We have new learning zone materials to support our existing and new products, and we will be expanding our training, outreach, and services and engagement in the years to come. So in summary, the CCCS is evolving its products and services commensurate with the increasing demand and evolution of climate science. The demand on our services is definitely increasing, and this is in part due to the increasing awareness of the impacts of a changing climate on Canadian society and the need to adapt. And it is also there's a bit of a stick there to push resilience in Canada, and that is coming in the form of things like mandatory risk disclosure in the finance sector, and more and more the need for mandatory risk assessments to qualify for, in particular, federal funding. Recent investment Enhancements to Canada's climate modeling, assessment, and services will strengthen the science to assessment to services continuum in Canada. And this will result in really a step level increase in the scope of climate data and services that we're able to provide going forward. And I just want to say that our collaborations with ClimateWest and other regional partners are a key part of our strategy to deliver climate services to Canadians by ensuring that Canadians have access to the regional expertise and support that they need to consider climate change in their decisions. So that is that. Thank you, Kara. Sure.
You hit the mic on that we both have a mic.
Okay.
I saw one question pop up in the chat.
Okay.
Well, that would help.
Do I?
How about now? Okay. Well, the one question I saw pop up in the chat, Heather, was about this important point you made about if we keep emitting, temperature keeps going up. And then when we stop emitting as a globe, the temperature will stay the same. And the question was, will the temperature go up a little bit, even if we stop emitting? Well, does it go up for a little bit of time before it stabilizes?
Oh, yeah. So how much warming is locked into the system is essentially a question. Yeah, there is some that is locked into the system. So there, there'll probably be a little bit of an continued augmentation in the temperature before it kind of hits a new equilibrium.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I think the point you made was important. I saw people nodding when you said, basically, we have to stop, we have to go to net zero. And even then we're staying at the temperature that we are at the time. There's no going back to today or where we're in the past.
Exactly. With so many environmental issues, we try and solve the issue to bring things back to how they were. And then humans are very nostalgic. So we really like everything to be back how it was. The future is always scary. The past is always, I don't know, better or comforting. And so unfortunately with climate change, we have to break that mindset that we have to appreciate the past because we're never going back. And that is a real mindset change for so many people, that in solving climate change, what we are doing is we are arresting continued climate change. And unfortunately, that's the future that we locked in, because our oceans have saved us from a lot of warming, but they're going to start giving back that heat and CO2 as soon as we stop injecting CO2 into the atmosphere. And that's going to take a long time.
That's a big point. So thank you very much, Heather. Thanks for your presentation. Thank you.